Have you ever looked around and wondered, what happened to Canada? A country once praised for its stability, prosperity, and quality of life is now facing economic turmoil, a housing crisis, political instability, and growing social unrest. How did we get here? Is Canada truly on the decline, or is there still hope to turn things around? In today's video, we're diving into 10 major reasons why Canada is falling apart. And trust me, some of these might shock you. From skyrocketing crime to unaffordable living costs, this is the reality many Canadians are facing right now. But we want to hear from you. Do you think Canada is beyond saving, or do you see a way forward? Drop a comment below with your thoughts. And while you're here, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our deep dives into global issues. Let's get into it. Canada has traditionally been seen as a politically stable country, but in recent years, instability and public dissatisfaction have been growing. The country's leadership has become increasingly polarizing, ineffective, and unpopular, leading to a deepening divide among Canadians over the direction of the nation. One of the biggest signals of political instability was Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's plummeting approval ratings, which fell to the lowest of his career in 2024. Ultimately leading to his resignation in early 2025. While Trudeau's early years in office were marked by optimism and progressive policies, his later years were plagued by scandals, economic failures, and social unrest. His handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, controversial carbon taxes, rising crime rates, and inflation all contributed to a loss of confidence in his leadership. Additionally, corruption allegations and government mismanagement have fueled further distrust. In 2023, multiple government agencies were caught in misuse of public funds scandals, including a $54 million contract for a failed government app. These types of incidents make Canadians feel that their leaders are out of touch, wasteful, and unaccountable. So the big question is, if your government failed to listen to you, ignored your struggles, and mismanaged your country's future, would you still trust the system? Canada's economy is heavily dependent on trade, with the United States being its largest trading partner. However, tensions between the two nations have threatened Canada's financial stability, particularly in industries like oil, agriculture, and manufacturing. One glaring example is Alberta's economy, which relies on exporting oil to the U.S. If America were to impose new tariffs on Canadian oil, Alberta could see a $5.2 billion budget deficit in the 2025-26 fiscal year, a drastic shift from its current $5.8 billion surplus. The impact wouldn't just be limited to Alberta, it would ripple across the country, leading to job losses, reduced investment, and increased fuel prices for consumers. This uncertainty creates an unstable environment for businesses, investors, and workers alike. If you were working in an industry at risk of massive job losses due to trade wars, how would you prepare? Would you consider switching careers, moving provinces, or even leaving Canada entirely? Poverty in Canada has become a hidden crisis. Official statistics estimate that 10% of the population lives below the poverty line. But Food Banks Canada suggests the real number is closer to 25%. That means 1 in 4 Canadians struggles to afford basic necessities like food, housing, and healthcare. The economic downturn and inflation have made things worse. In major cities like Toronto and Vancouver, grocery prices have skyrocketed. A simple trip to the supermarket for essential items like eggs, bread, and milk now costs nearly 30% more than it did in 2019. Rent has also surged, with average monthly costs for a one-bedroom apartment exceeding $2,500 in many urban areas. For families living paycheck to paycheck, these increases have devastating effects. Many are forced to skip meals, work multiple jobs, or rely on food banks just to survive. If you suddenly found yourself unable to afford rent or food, what would you do? Would you move to a smaller town, rely on government assistance, or look for opportunities abroad? Canada's publicly funded healthcare system has long been a source of national pride, but in recent years, it has become overwhelmed. As of 2021, 20% of Canadians lacked access to a family doctor, leading to longer wait times for basic medical care. In some provinces, it takes over 6 months to see a specialist, and emergency room wait times have exceeded 12 hours in urban hospitals. One of the biggest challenges is underfunding. Primary care funding in Canada makes up just 5.3% of total healthcare spending, far below the 8.1% average in comparable countries. This lack of investment has led to burnout among doctors and nurses, forcing many to leave the profession or seek work in private clinics, which are often unaffordable for the average Canadian. For those in need of urgent care, this can be a matter of life and death. Imagine suffering from a serious condition, like cancer or heart disease, only to be told you'll need to wait months for treatment. How would that impact your trust in the healthcare system? Owning a home in Canada has become a distant dream for many. A 2024 survey found that 43% of Canadians reported increased financial stress due to housing costs, with 58% fearing they may not be able to afford their rent or mortgage in the near future. This crisis has been particularly brutal for young Canadians. Those aged 18 to 44 are delaying major life milestones like starting a family, buying a home, or even moving out of their parents' houses because of high living costs. The median price of a home in Toronto is now over $1.1 million, while in Vancouver, it's even higher at $1.4 million. If you were in a situation where owning a home was out of reach, what would you do? Would you consider moving to a smaller town, taking on massive debt, or even leaving Canada altogether? All right, we've already covered some heavy topics, and we're only halfway through. If you've made it this far, first of all, thank you. This channel exists because of viewers like you, and we appreciate every single one of you who watches, comments, and supports our content. Now let's get real. Do you agree with what we've discussed so far? Are things as bad as they seem, or do you think Canada still has time to turn things around? Let us know in the comments. And if you're enjoying this deep dive into Canada's challenges, hit that like button and subscribe for more content just like this. What other topics would you like us to cover? Maybe a breakdown of the housing crisis in other countries? Or a look at which countries are actually thriving right now? Let us know. We read every comment. Now let's get back to it. Canada's economy, once one of the most stable in the world, has faced increasing turbulence over the past few years. The country's budget deficit for the 2024-25 fiscal year reached $21.72 billion in just the first 9 months, a slight improvement from the previous year's $23.61 billion, but still a significant indicator of financial strain. While government revenue increased by 11.8% due to higher taxes and duties, this was offset by a 10.7% rise in program expenses and a 17.3% surge in public debt charges, largely due to higher interest rates. This growing deficit raises concerns about long-term sustainability. The national debt is already above $1.2 trillion, and servicing this debt is becoming more expensive. If the government continues running deficits without significant economic growth, future generations could face higher taxes and reduced public services. For everyday Canadians, this translates into higher costs of living, increased taxation, and potential cuts to essential services like healthcare and infrastructure. If you lived in a country where debt was spiraling out of control, how would you feel about the future? Would you trust the government to handle your tax dollars responsibly? Canada has long struggled with its relationship with Indigenous communities, but recent years have made the crisis even more evident. Indigenous peoples make up about 5% of the population, yet they experience some of the highest rates of poverty, incarceration, homelessness, and health disparities in the country. One of the most pressing issues is the suicide crisis among Indigenous youth. Suicide rates among First Nations people are 3 times higher than the national average, and in Inuit communities, the rate is 9 times higher. This tragic reality is often linked to intergenerational trauma, systemic neglect, and a lack of mental health resources. Imagine growing up in a community where almost every family has been affected by suicide. How would that shape your outlook on life? Another ongoing crisis is the epidemic of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Over the last 30 years, thousands of Indigenous women have been kidnapped or murdered in Canada, yet many cases remain unsolved. A national inquiry in 2019 concluded that the issue amounts to a genocide caused by systemic racism and neglect, but meaningful change has been slow. Canada has seen a dramatic increase in social unrest in recent years, fueled by economic struggles, housing shortages, and rising crime. Public dissatisfaction is growing, and more people feel that the country is heading in the wrong direction. Violent crime has surged across the country, with Statistics Canada reporting a 40% increase in crime rates since 2014. In major cities like Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal, shootings, stabbings, and home invasions are becoming more common. In 2023, carjackings in Toronto hit a record high, with criminals targeting everyday people in broad daylight. If you lived in a city where walking at night felt unsafe, how would that change your daily life? Beyond violent crime, drug use and homelessness have also increased dramatically. The opioid crisis continues to devastate communities, with over 38,000 opioid-related deaths between 2016 and 2023. Cities like Vancouver and Edmonton have seen tent cities expand as more people are unable to afford housing and fall into poverty. If the majority of people in your country believed the system was failing, would you try to fix it, or would you look for a way out? For decades, Canada has been one of the most welcoming countries for immigrants, with policies designed to bring in 500,000 new permanent residents per year. This has led to rapid population growth, particularly in major cities, but also intensified pressures on housing, healthcare, and social services. Many new immigrants arrive in Canada expecting to find high-paying jobs, affordable homes, and a better quality of life. Instead, many face high costs of living, job market barriers, and discrimination. 40% of new immigrants report struggling to find stable employment, and many end up working survival jobs far below their qualifications. Imagine moving to a new country with dreams of success, only to end up working minimum wage just to survive. How do you think Canada should handle this crisis? Should immigration be reduced, or should the government invest more in housing and social services to support newcomers? For years, Canada was seen as a model of stability, economic success, and social progress. But today, that reputation is fading as the country struggles with economic turmoil, political instability, and social unrest. International organizations have begun to take notice. In 2023, Bloomberg ranked Canada as one of the least affordable places to live in the developed world, largely due to out-of-control housing prices and stagnant wages. Meanwhile, Canada's standing in global economic rankings has slipped, with growth projections lower than those of many other G7 nations. Foreign investors are also pulling back. Major companies like Toyota, GM, and Amazon have scaled down their operations in Canada, choosing instead to invest in the United States and other markets with lower taxes and fewer bureaucratic hurdles. If businesses no longer see Canada as a place for growth, what does that mean for future job opportunities? When a country loses its reputation as a leader in business, economics, and diplomacy, it risks being left behind. If Canada continues on this path, will it still be considered one of the best places to live in the world? So what do you think? Is Canada truly heading for disaster, or is there still hope for a turnaround? The truth is, no country is perfect, and while Canada is facing serious challenges, history has shown that nations can rise and fall based on the choices they make. The big question is, what choices will Canada make next? We want to hear from you. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on everything we covered today. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more content like this, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.